They say history began when the first stone was carved, when memory was pressed into clay, when the first name was written. But before the lines and borders of time were drawn, before the age of kings and chronicles, there might have been another world, luminous, ordered, and cold as the northern light. The ancients called it Hyperborea, a realm beyond the breath of Boreas, the god of the north wind, a paradise hidden somewhere beyond the Arctic Circle, where night and day flowed endlessly into one another, and the air itself shimmered like glass. In myths scattered from Greece to Siberia, Hyperborea was not merely a place, but a memory, of a people untouched by decay, masters of the stars and the rhythm of the earth, who vanished when the world shifted its axis and ice reclaimed their sun. Some said they were the first civilization, older than Atlantis, older than Egypt, the architects of lost technologies that shaped the dawn of humankind. What if they truly existed, and their echoes still hum beneath the polar ice, waiting to be rediscovered? What if the North itself holds the blueprint of an age erased from the maps of history? Welcome to Deformed History. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. The story of Hyperborea begins not with discovery, but with disappearance. Somewhere in the blurred threshold between myth and memory, ancient texts speak of a land beyond the north wind, where the sun never set, and life moved in rhythm with a perfect cosmic order. To the Greeks, it was a place untouched by sickness or war, where music and knowledge were one, and humanity had not yet fallen into time. But when you look deeper, beneath the metaphors, beneath the poetry of Pindar and Herodotus, something strange begins to emerge. Fragments that hint not only at a myth, but at the echo of an actual civilization. Geographers of antiquity struggled to locate it. Some placed it beyond the Riphean Mountains, a mysterious range that no longer appears on any map. Others believed it lay across an endless ocean, north of Scythia, where icebergs drifted like ancient temples. But the strange thing is how many different cultures described the same idea. The Persians spoke of a polar paradise ruled by luminous beings. The Hindus told of Shvetadvipa, the White Island, home to godlike sages who preserved the knowledge of creation. Even the Celts and Norse carried whispers of a radiant north, a land of giants and architects of light. When myths so distant converge on the same direction of the compass, can it truly be coincidence? Or are we hearing fragments of the same lost memory? If Hyperborea was real, what could have destroyed it? The answer may lie in the Earth itself. Around 12,000 years ago, the planet underwent violent convulsions. Geological records show sudden temperature spikes, massive floods, and extinctions that swept across continents. Ice cores from Greenland reveal evidence of a cataclysm so abrupt it defies ordinary explanation, as if the planet's axis had shifted, dragging entire climates and civilizations with it. Charles Hapgood, a 20th-century scholar once supported by Einstein, proposed that Earth's crust may have slipped over its core, displacing entire land masses in a single motion. If such a polar shift occurred, the legendary land beyond the north wind could have been buried beneath ice, erased not by myth but by physics. And yet even buried myths leave traces. In Siberia and northern Russia, archaeologists have found inexplicable megalithic ruins, stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons, fitted with precision beyond Bronze Age capability. Near Lake Baikal, researchers uncovered carved artifacts older than recorded history, aligned with the cardinal directions as if their builders understood geomagnetic design. Further west, along the Kola Peninsula, mysterious labyrinths of stone still stand, their spiral patterns echoing ancient symbols of eternity found from Greece to Peru. None of these sites fit neatly into the timeline of known civilizations, yet they share an orientation, always toward the north. Could it be that the Hyperboreans, whoever they were, left behind these remnants as markers, the last coordinates of a world swallowed by ice? If so, why were they forgotten, while Atlantis and Lemuria endured in legend? Some historians suggest that Hyperborea was deliberately erased, its memory dissolved through centuries of reinterpretation. In early Christian Europe, the North became a symbol of exile and darkness. Anything beyond the known world was rebranded as demonic or cursed. Myths of radiant northern beings turned into stories of fallen angels, of Nephilim, of watchers cast out of heaven. The old paradise inverted into the polar hell of Dante's Inferno, frozen, silent, and forgotten. But perhaps that inversion itself is the clue. Cultures preserve truth by hiding it in its opposite. The frozen hell might once have been a radiant Eden. When myths invert, they do so under pressure, political, religious, or existential. If the Hyperboreans once ruled an age before history, their downfall might have coincided with humanity's first attempt to rewrite its own past. What if the birth of civilization as we know it, the rise of Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus, was not a beginning, but a reconstruction after something much older collapsed? Modern science rarely entertains such thoughts, yet anomalies persist. In Greenland's ice, traces of ancient pollen suggest temperate forests once grew where glaciers now stand. In the Arctic seabed, sonar has detected symmetrical formations resembling submerged structures, though official studies call them geological. Even ancient star maps, from Babylonian tablets to Greek geometry, contain references to a celestial pole that no longer exists, as if the heavens themselves had shifted since that forgotten age. If Hyperborea did exist, it may have been both physical and metaphysical, a civilization aligned so perfectly with cosmic forces that when the planet's balance broke, it vanished with it. To those who survived, the memory became mythology. The survivors may have migrated south, seeding the myths of the gods who came from the north in every cradle of civilization. In Greece, Apollo was said to retreat each winter to Hyperborea, returning with spring's renewal. In India, the Aryan tribes spoke of northern teachers who descended from a realm of perpetual dawn. Even in Mesoamerica, the Olmec and Maya revered pale-skinned deities said to have come from where the sun sleeps. These patterns suggest not random invention, but a single source refracted through time. Yet, if this was once the heart of the world, why do we not remember it clearly? Memory fades not only through time, but through design. History is written by those who inherit the ruins. Empires rise on the bones of forgotten civilizations, and each new order rewrites the beginning to justify its reign. Perhaps Hyperborea was too perfect, too luminous, a reminder that humanity once lived in harmony with forces it can no longer comprehend. To preserve its illusion of progress, history had to begin again, with ignorance as its foundation. Still, something lingers, in the magnetic pull of the north, in the auroras that shimmer like ancient fire, in the human longing for a lost equilibrium. We chase it through polar expeditions, through myths of Shambhala and Agartha, through theories of hollow earths and inner suns. All of them might be distorted reflections of a single truth. That once, before the Ice Age closed the gate, there was a civilization at the top of the world, and its silence still shapes our dreams. And if that is so, then maybe the real mystery is not where Hyperborea was, but why we needed to forget it. Who benefits when origins are erased? Who guards the void that history cannot fill? The answer lies somewhere between ice and memory, where myth turns into evidence, and evidence turns into myth again. The second layer of the Hyperborean mystery unfolds not in the heavens or the ice, but in the fragile boundary between myth and archaeology, where symbols begin to look like blueprints and stories sound like encoded memories. When ancient Greek historians spoke of Hyperborea, they weren't describing a dreamland born from imagination. They wrote with a strange confidence, as though quoting a lost geography. Herodotus mentioned travelers from the north who brought offerings of amber and gold to Delphi, claiming descent from a radiant race who once lived beyond the reach of winter. Pindar called it a land of pure light, where neither disease nor decay touch mortal flesh. Such imagery might seem poetic, but it aligns eerily with the environmental reality of a world bathed in constant polar daylight before the cataclysm that tilted Earth's axis. The traces of these people, if they existed, are scattered like faint constellations, each too distant to prove alone, but together forming an unmistakable pattern. On the windswept tundra of the Kola Peninsula, Russian researchers in the 20th century found cyclopean structures, granite blocks weighing thousands of tons, stacked and cut with geometric precision. Their surfaces were polished as if by machinery, though they predated any known civilization. Nearby, in the Ural Mountains, archaeologists uncovered what they called the world's oldest astronomical observatory, a megalithic ring predating Stonehenge by millennia. Its alignments matched solstices, equinoxes, and even the precession of the equinoxes, a cycle requiring thousands of years of observation. Who were these ancient astronomers, dwelling in a region long considered inhospitable, constructing monuments that required advanced understanding of both geometry and the stars? Some dismissed them as primitive hunters who accidentally arranged stones in symmetrical formations. Yet even skeptical researchers admit the craftsmanship exceeds that of Neolithic technology. When you place these discoveries beside ancient accounts of northern sages who knew the measure of the heavens, the fragments begin to merge. Hyperborea might not have been a single city or kingdom, but a vast network of polar cultures interconnected by trade and sacred knowledge, the first global civilization, erased not by conquest but by climate. The pattern extends beyond the north. In Greece, the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, the very center of the ancient world, was said to be founded by priests who journeyed south from Hyperborea. They carried sacred relics of amber and laurel, symbols of light and rebirth. The myth says Apollo spent half the year among mortals, and the other half returning to Hyperborea, a cycle echoing the solar rhythm of polar seasons. Modern researchers have pointed out that the architecture of Delphi mirrors celestial geometry traced to northern latitudes. It is as if the temple were a southern replica of an older, lost sanctuary built under the eternal sun. Even Plato, in his later dialogues, hinted at knowledge older than Egypt, hidden in the northern lands. He described a divine race who lived in harmony with the cosmos until they fell through hubris and the earth turned over. While his tale of Atlantis captured imagination, Hyperborea remained the unspoken twin, the polar mirror of the drowned continent. One sank beneath the sea, the other beneath the ice. Between them lies the forgotten prehistory of humankind. The question, then, is whether humanity's first science, astronomy, geometry, acoustics, was inherited rather than invented. In Siberian myth, the Hyperboreans were said to command the resonance of stone, shaping matter through sound. In Greek Orphic tradition, they were the guardians of the music of the spheres, the harmonies that governed the cosmos. Modern physicists might call it resonance or frequency, but the ancient texts describe it as sacred vibration, the power to align human consciousness with universal rhythm. Could it be that the monumental precision of ancient architecture, from the pyramids to Tiwanaku, reflects a forgotten Hyperborean principle? That matter responds to harmony, not force? In the 19th century, the scholar Bal Gangadhar Tilak, studying the Vedas, argued that their descriptions of dawns lasting months and stars circling the horizon only made sense from a polar viewpoint. He proposed that the earliest Indo-Aryan hymns were composed by ancestors who lived in the Arctic before the last ice age, preserving the memory of a sun that never set. His theory was dismissed for decades, too mythic, too vast. Yet recent studies of DNA migration and ancient linguistics reveal a slow drift of northern tribes southward, following the retreat of ice around 10,000 BCE. Their languages carried the same root words for light, north, and God. Their myths carried the same geometry of the heavens. If this migration was the aftershock of Hyperborea's collapse, then perhaps our entire civilization was born from its refuges. The sacred symbols that appear across continents, spirals, solar crosses, swastikas, labyrinths, may not be coincidental ornamentation, but inherited memory, a common visual language of an older world. Archaeologists find these same motifs carved into rock faces in Scandinavia, Siberia, and the Andes. They appear on pottery, temples, and even in the blueprints of megaliths. Could it be that humanity's first language was geometric, its grammar based on proportion and vibration? If so, then Hyperborea was not merely a culture. It was a philosophy of alignment between cosmos and consciousness. But somewhere along the line, the current broke. Knowledge fragmented. The same symbols that once represented harmony became weapons of ideology and fear. The swastika, once the Hyperborean emblem of the eternal rotation of the sun, was corrupted into a symbol of death. The North, once revered as sacred origin, became associated with barbarism and cold. This inversion, repeated across epochs, hints at something deeper than coincidence, a long process of distortion, perhaps deliberate. When knowledge is lost, it is not always by accident. Who would have reason to conceal the truth of an older, unified origin? Some point to the consolidation of power in the early empires, the need to define civilization as beginning with their own dynasties. Others suspect that ancient priesthoods and later religious orders deliberately redefined the myth of Hyperborea to control the narrative of human descent. If mankind once possessed divine knowledge, then no temple or throne could claim exclusive access to truth. To preserve authority, the sacred north had to be recast as myth. And so, over millennia, Hyperborea faded, not only beneath ice, but beneath interpretation. Yet echoes persisted in secret traditions. Alchemists spoke of the polar mercury, a hidden element born from the north wind, symbolizing the lost unity of spirit and matter. Medieval cartographers drew phantom islands around the pole, 4 continents encircling a magnetic mountain, with rivers flowing outward like the veins of the world. Renaissance mystics saw the aurora borealis as the last visible breath of the vanished land, a luminous whisper that the axis once turned differently. All of it points to one haunting possibility, that the axis of human consciousness itself shifted with the poles. What we call history may be a dim reflection of an age when memory, matter, and meaning were one. The Hyperboreans, if they lived, might not have vanished. They might have withdrawn, waiting for the cycle to turn again. Every myth of a golden age destined to return, from the Greek Cronian age to the Hindu Satya Yuga, may trace its root to this same lost alignment. And so we circle back to the question, what truly ends a civilization? Is it flood, fire, or forgetting? Perhaps the deepest extinction is amnesia, the kind that erases not bodies, but origins. Beneath the aurora's shifting veil, the silence of the north is not empty. It hums faintly, like an old machine reawakening. But whether it will ever speak again, or whether we would recognize its voice, remains the quietest riddle of all. If the Hyperboreans were real, if they once walked beneath a pale and endless sun, then the traces of their existence would not only rest in stone, but in memory itself. Cultures forget in strange ways. Sometimes they bury their ancestors under myth. Sometimes they encode them in language. And language, more than ruins or relics, carries what cannot be erased by ice. When you listen closely to the oldest tongues, Sanskrit, Greek, the Proto-Indo-European roots, you find a curious symmetry, as if they all remember the same direction. The north. Words for light, heaven, and life often share the same root as north wind. Even the word Arctic comes from Arctos, meaning bear, not in reference to the animal, but to the constellation, the Great Bear, Ursa Major, which forever circles the polar star. The idea of the pole, of an eternal center, runs through the oldest myths like a pulse. Perhaps that is why ancient cosmologies all placed a mountain, pillar, or world tree at the top of existence. Mount Meru in India, Mount Olympus in Greece, Mount Hera Berazaiti in Persia, each described as the axis mundi, the pillar of heaven. In the north, the Sami spoke of a golden column rising from the earth to the stars. The Norse called it Yggdrasil, the ash tree binding 9 realms. These are not coincidences of imagination, but cartographies of memory, symbolic maps pointing toward a real geography once sacred. When the world's axis literally shifted at the end of the last ice age, those who survived may have transformed the catastrophe into metaphor. The fall of the axis became the fall of man. The world tree broken became the separation between heaven and earth. Modern scholars dismiss such myths as psychological allegory, but the symbols behave like fossils, remnants of something that once had mass and form. Consider the legends of Thule, the mysterious northern island described by Pytheas, a Greek explorer in the 4th century BCE. He claimed to have sailed 6 days beyond Britain to a land where the sea turned solid, where the sun skimmed the horizon without ever setting. His contemporaries ridiculed him. Yet today, Satellite data show that during the Holocene, vast stretches of the Arctic Ocean may have been navigable, with ice-free corridors connecting Europe to the pole. Could Thule have been the last remnant of a greater Hyperborean world, dissolving as the ice returned? The Nazis, driven by occult fascination, believed so. In the 1930s, the Ahnenerbe Society sent expeditions to Tibet, the Arctic, and Antarctica, seeking traces of the Arctic homeland. They interpreted Hyperborea as the cradle of the Aryan race, twisting myth into ideology. Yet beneath their distortion lies a disturbing irony that secret orders across history, from Hermetic circles to theosophists, all whispered of a hidden northern wisdom, a forgotten mother civilization. Helena Blavatsky wrote that the first human race was born in the imperishable sacred land at the pole, guided by luminous beings she called the Sons of the Fire Mist. She described Hyperborea not as a single continent, but as a state of planetary balance when the axis stood upright and seasons did not yet exist. Whether metaphor or revelation, her words echo an ancient intuition that something broke in both the earth and the human soul when that balance ended. If we follow that intuition, the signs of rupture appear everywhere. Around 9700 BCE, glaciers melted with violent suddenness. Oceans rose more than 100 meters. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, though contested, suggests that a comet struck the northern ice sheet, triggering massive floods and firestorms. Plato's date for the fall of Atlantis coincides precisely with this event. Could it be that the Hyperborean world, positioned near the pole, perished in the same cataclysm? If the axis truly shifted, the North would have plunged into darkness almost overnight. A paradise of light turned to endless winter. The survivors, migrating south, would have carried fragments of their lost world, myths of an eternal dawn, of celestial music, of gods who walked the earth. Archaeologists find echoes of that memory in the strangest places. The ruins of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, built 12,000 years ago, appear suddenly, without precedent. Its megaliths align not with local geography, but with the north-south celestial axis. The builders knew of precession, geometry, and stone resonance long before the invention of writing. Could they have been descendants of a northern priesthood, rebuilding what they remembered in a new land? The animal carvings, foxes, cranes, serpents, correspond to constellations visible from higher latitudes, not Anatolia. It is as if Göbekli Tepe were not the beginning of civilization, but the memorial of one that had already ended. The same pattern recurs in myth. In Sumer, the gods who descended from heaven arrived not from the east or south, but from a distant mountain of sunrise, a poetic term for the north. In Egypt, the earliest pharaohs called themselves followers of Horus, whose eye, the polar star, never set. In the Norse Edda, the gods are called Aesir, linguistically linked to the Sanskrit Asura, suggesting a shared memory of beings from a luminous northern realm. Even the biblical Eden, described as a garden watered by 4 rivers flowing outward, mirrors the medieval maps of the polar world divided by 4 streams around a magnetic mountain. When myths from Sumer, Egypt, India, and Scandinavia all depict a radiant north, perhaps we are not dealing with coincidence but convergence, a single story retold by different survivors. What, then, was Hyperborea's secret? Perhaps it was not technology in the mechanical sense, but attunement, a synchronization between human consciousness and the natural frequencies of the earth. Ancient builders oriented their monuments not merely for aesthetics, but for resonance. The Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, and Tiwanaku all hum at frequencies tied to the Schumann resonance of the planet. This knowledge, buried beneath ritual and myth, might have originated in the polar civilization where day and night blurred, and rhythm itself became sacred. To live in such a world would be to feel time differently, not as a linear march, but as a circle of return. If that is true, then modern civilization, with its obsession for progress and domination, may represent the farthest point from the Hyperborean ideal. We have replaced harmony with control, resonance with noise, memory with data. Perhaps the loss of Hyperborea is not merely geological, but psychological, the separation of mind from cosmos. The ancients called this the second fall, when man ceased to hear the music of the spheres. It is no wonder that the myths of a coming age of renewal, the return of the golden dawn, the pole star reborn, still haunt every culture. Deep down, we may be waiting not for gods to return, but for alignment itself to resume. Yet, how do we awaken a memory older than history? Some say it stirs when we dream of light that has no source, or when we stand beneath the aurora and feel something both alien and familiar. The northern lights are more than plasma. They are echoes of solar wind colliding with Earth's magnetic breath, the same breath that may have once encircled Hyperborea. Every flicker across the Arctic sky might be a pulse from that vanished world, a heartbeat preserved in electromagnetic color. If the Hyperboreans truly mastered the harmonics of Earth, their legacy could still be alive, not in artifacts, but in frequencies. Some researchers speak of acoustic archaeology, the study of sound within ancient structures. When tones are played at certain resonant frequencies inside these chambers, patterns of standing waves emerge, forming luminous geometries in dust and air, sacred sound made visible. It is tempting to think that the Hyperboreans once used such knowledge not only to build, but to heal, to bridge the gap between matter and mind. Still, one question remains. If such wisdom existed, why has it never returned? Perhaps because rediscovery demands silence, the very silence we have forgotten how to keep. The world grows louder, the signal buried beneath our own noise. Maybe Hyperborea has not vanished at all. Maybe it sleeps in that quiet place where myth, science, and memory still speak the same language. But until we remember how to listen, the north wind will continue to whisper its unanswered riddle across the frozen sea. Every civilization leaves a shadow, and sometimes the shadow lasts longer than the light. Hyperborea's shadow stretches across time, faint, fractured, but persistent, in places where history seems to hesitate, where something older than all recorded memory still vibrates beneath the surface. It is in those cracks that we find the faintest traces of an inheritance. Stories of beings who glowed with inner radiance, ruins misaligned with known timelines, maps that show continents that should not exist. Even today, explorers of the Arctic report magnetic anomalies, ancient riverbeds buried under glaciers, and structures that radar cannot classify. The North, long dismissed as void, refuses to stay silent. The Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 from sources older than known cartography, is one of the most unsettling clues. It shows Antarctica not covered in ice, but as a green, habitable land with rivers and mountains accurately mapped beneath its current frozen shell. Charles Hapgood and later cartographers confirmed the coastline aligns with modern seismic data, information impossible to obtain before the invention of sonar. Hapgood suggested that the map was copied from an archive dating back to a civilization that knew the Earth before the last ice age, when the poles were in a different position. If true, then some ancient culture, perhaps Hyperborea itself, must have mapped the globe long before recorded history. That idea unsettled academia, for it implies not a slow ascent from ignorance, but a fall from forgotten knowledge. Further north, explorers have discovered vast stone formations on the islands of Franz Josef Land and Novaya Zemlya, some geometric, others resembling ziggurats half swallowed by permafrost. Their patterns are too regular to be natural, yet their age exceeds the earliest known human settlements. In 2014, a joint Russian-Finnish geological team published images of hexagonal basalt terraces in the Arctic Circle, carved by processes unknown. Some dismissed them as volcanic formations, but even under magnification, they reveal tool-like regularity. Could they be the last visible bones of a city once aligned with the polar sun? A Hyperborean sanctuary now buried beneath miles of ice? And yet, evidence alone cannot resurrect memory. Myths survive where facts cannot. The Hyperborean legacy hides not only in ruins but in rituals, ancient ceremonies that seem to repeat the same cosmology. The spiral dances of the Sami people, the circular fire rites of Vedic tradition, the polar alignment of Egyptian temples, all revolve around a common axis, the invisible center of the world. In each, movement mirrors the heavens, suggesting that dance itself was once a form of remembrance, a living echo of an age when the human body was a compass. If the Hyperboreans truly existed, perhaps they understood something we have forgotten, that orientation is sacred, and that losing the axis, the literal and spiritual north, means losing ourselves. But what does it mean to lose a direction? Physically, it could refer to the Earth's shifting poles, which geologists confirm have wandered dramatically over time. Magnetically, it could mean a reversal, a moment when compasses spin aimlessly. Spiritually, it may signify the dislocation of consciousness, the collective amnesia that follows catastrophe. When ancient myths speak of a world turned upside down, perhaps they remember both, a geological upheaval mirrored by a psychological one. The end of Hyperborea might have been less an extinction and more a transformation, a descent from harmony into survival, from resonance into struggle. Humanity, cast out from the realm of eternal light, learned to live by fragment, by cycle, by shadow. What remains most haunting is how pieces of this forgotten alignment appear where they should not. In Tibet, the Kalachakra Tantra speaks of Shambhala, a radiant kingdom hidden beyond the mountains, where time itself moves differently. The texts describe it as north of the river Sita, a direction scholars rarely question. The Sita, when traced linguistically, leads towards the Arctic, toward the same latitude once thought to cradle Hyperborea. In medieval Europe, monks spoke of Ultima Thule, the last habitable realm before the world's edge, glowing with perpetual dawn. And in Native American cosmology, there is a myth of the first people who came from the land where the sky touches the earth, a place of endless day. Across continents, the northern light repeats its name, disguised in different tongues. Some scholars have suggested that the memory of Hyperborea survived through secret lineages, the so-called polar tradition that passed through the Druids, the Orphics, and the Hermetic orders. Traces appear in their symbols. The eight-spoked wheel, the compass rose, the spiral of eternal return. Even the Christian halo, a circle of gold above the head, echoes the polar sun that never sets. These are not isolated artistic coincidences, but survivals of a metaphysical geography carried like embers through millennia of forgetting. When civilizations fall, their truths do not vanish. They migrate into symbol. Yet for every hint that points upward, there are forces that pull the story back into obscurity. The 20th century witnessed a deliberate suppression of the Hyperborean idea, after it was misused by political movements seeking racial or national myths. To preserve historical integrity, scholars banished the name from serious discourse, but silence has its own shadow. By refusing to speak of the lost North, we may have erased not ideology, but insight. The Hyperborean myth, stripped of distortion, may reveal not supremacy, but equilibrium, a memory of unity before the age of division. Modern physics, curiously, seems to circle the same horizon. The universe, once thought chaotic, now appears bound by invisible fields, coherent frequencies, and geometric order. Some cosmologists speak of a cosmic axis, a mysterious alignment of galactic structures running through the northern sky, dubbed the axis of evil. The term was meant as irony, but its resonance with ancient myth is striking. Could it be that the universe itself still remembers the same orientation our ancestors worshipped, a hidden order linking microcosm and macrocosm, the atom and the star? If the Hyperboreans perceived this axis intuitively, they may have lived not in superstition, but in resonance with the very structure of space-time. And perhaps that is why they vanished. A civilization built on resonance would die the moment its frequency broke. When the planet shifted, when ice consumed their temples and the magnetic field quivered, the bridge between matter and consciousness may have collapsed. Their wisdom, unrecorded in books but encoded in energy, would dissipate like sound into silence. What we call myth might be the after-echo of their vibration, still reverberating through the world's polar lights. But what if they never truly died? Some esoteric traditions claim the Hyperboreans withdrew into the inner realms of the Earth, into Agartha, not a hollow planet, but a dimension folded within, inaccessible to our senses. The aurora, in this view, would be their threshold, energy leaking from the higher strata of being. It is easy to dismiss such notions, yet quantum physics now describes space as layered, vibrating, multidimensional. Perhaps myth was simply the first language for what science has yet to articulate. Still, the real power of the Hyperborean story lies not in proof, but in reflection. It forces us to question the arrow of history, the assumption that progress always moves forward. What if the truest knowledge lies not ahead, but behind, in a direction we can no longer face? The ancients oriented their temples north for a reason. The compass, even when forgotten, points there instinctively. Maybe memory itself is magnetic, and something deep within the human psyche still aligns toward the lost light of that ancient pole. We cannot return to Hyperborea, but perhaps we can remember what it stood for. A world where balance replaced conquest, where knowledge served harmony, not power. In that sense, Hyperborea is not just a vanished civilization. It is an archetype, a mirror held to our own dissonance. The more chaotic our world becomes, the more its silence calls. The wind that sweeps across the Arctic today is the same wind that once touched their temples, It hums with the same frequency, though few can hear it, and somewhere beneath the ice, beneath miles of forgotten time, perhaps their instruments still rest, not machines of war or labor, but resonators of stone, waiting for the world to find its rhythm again. Until then, the polar night remains what it has always been. A veil drawn over a secret too bright for the modern eye, whispering to those who listen that not all that is lost is gone. There is a strange stillness that settles over the idea of Hyperborea, as if the further we trace its outlines, the quieter the world becomes. What began as myth, as whisper, as the faint shimmer of an impossible geography, now feels like a reflection of ourselves. Each age rediscovers the lost north in its own way, explorers charting maps beyond the pole, mystics chasing auroras, scientists listening for cosmic background hums that sound eerily like the music of the spheres. We keep reaching toward the same horizon, drawn not by proof, but by longing. For what if Hyperborea was never just a place, but a condition of being, a time when humanity and nature moved in unison, when consciousness was attuned to the breath of the planet itself? The Greeks believed that to reach Hyperborea, one could not simply travel north. One had to travel inward. It lay beyond Boreas, beyond the cold winds of thought, in a realm accessible only through purity of spirit. Later, mystery schools repeated the same truth in different tongues, that paradise is not a coordinate, but a frequency. The Pythagoreans called it the harmony of the spheres, a state where every living thing vibrates in perfect ratio. The Taoists spoke of the golden center, the still axis around which the universe turns. Even Christian mystics hinted at a polar Eden, an axis of light that fell with the fall of man. Each vision points to the same forgotten orientation, the return to a center that once existed both on the map and within the mind. And perhaps that is the final paradox. We search for Hyperborea in ancient ice and eroded maps, when its truest remnants may be within our own nervous system. The brain's pineal gland, long associated with the third eye, is sensitive to magnetic fields and light, a biological compass, quietly aligned with the Earth's poles. Ancient initiates described awakening it as the rising of the northern sun, the return of the lost light. Could it be that our very bodies remember the world before the shift, that deep within we carry the resonance of an age of perpetual dawn? Science shrugs at such possibilities, but intuition lingers like a ghost behind reason. In recent decades, the poles have begun to wander again. Magnetic north drifts unpredictably, glaciers recede, and auroras grow stronger, brighter, reaching farther south than ever recorded. Some dismiss it as climate and magnetism. Others feel something else, as if the planet were stirring, as if the ancient balance that once defined Hyperborea is slowly reawakening. Our machines may register only temperature and flux, but the human psyche feels in frequencies, not data. The more the poles move, the more restless our collective imagination becomes. Hyperborea is rising again, not as continent but as concept, a mirror of what we've lost, and perhaps what we might yet recover. To understand what it means, we must face the silence beneath history. Beneath the textbooks, beneath the ruins, there runs an undercurrent of memory, a vibration that hums between myth and matter. Every legend of a golden age, every tale of gods who walked among men, may be a translation of this same frequency. The Hyperboreans were said to communicate not through speech, but through tone, harmonic patterns that carried thought directly into form. When their world fell, that resonance broke, and humanity was left with language, fragments of sound severed from meaning. Since then, all philosophy, all art, all science has been an attempt to rebuild the bridge, to remember how to speak to the universe again. It is tempting to imagine that the great monuments of antiquity were such attempts. The pyramids of Giza, aligned perfectly to true north, echo a cosmic precision beyond their age. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the step temples of the Andes, all climb toward a vanishing point in the sky, as if yearning for a pole no longer visible. Even cathedrals of the medieval world, with their rose windows and harmonic vaults, seem to vibrate with faint memory. Perhaps the architects were not merely designing places of worship, but building instruments, resonant chambers meant to recreate the lost sound of the north. Modern man, however, listens differently. We measure frequencies with machines, but ignore their meaning. We seek proof, not pattern. Yet every discovery, from the quantum vibration of particles to the gravitational hum of galaxies, brings us closer to what the ancients already intuited, that the universe is not built of matter, but of music. If Hyperborea was ever real, it may have existed in that perfect intersection between tone and form, a civilization sustained not by dominance, but by resonance. The question is whether we can hear it again before the silence deepens. Somewhere deep beneath the Arctic ice, sensors now record low-frequency sounds. A constant, rhythmic thrum scientists have yet to explain. They call it the polar resonance, a subsonic vibration traveling through the crust of the Earth. It could be tectonic, magnetic, or something else entirely. But if myth and memory have any truth, perhaps it is the last breath of Hyperborea, pulsing faintly beneath the ice, a reminder that the Earth itself remembers even when we do not. And still, the question persists. If Hyperborea was a civilization of balance, why was it allowed to fall? Every myth suggests the same answer. Not punishment, but cycle. The wheel must turn, the axis must tilt, so that consciousness can forget and rediscover itself anew. Just as winter yields to spring, the age of darkness yields to dawn. The fall of Hyperborea may not have been an end, but an inhale, a gathering of silence before another note in the eternal song. The Hyperborean ideal, in that sense, never truly died. It sleeps within every act of remembrance, every question that refuses the final answer. Maybe that is why the North has always drawn dreamers. The frozen landscapes, the endless twilight, the aurora's ghostly shimmer. They awaken something older than curiosity. They stir the part of the human spirit that once knew alignment. To stand beneath the aurora is to stand at the edge of memory, where time folds back on itself and the air vibrates with a song just beyond hearing. The Hyperboreans may not return as beings or cities, but as a state of awareness, a slow remembering that we are, and always were, part of a greater harmony. And so, after all the ruins and theories and shifting poles, what remains is not certainty, but reverence. The mystery of Hyperborea resists conclusion because it was never meant to be solved, only felt. It belongs to that quiet region between knowledge and wonder, where the world hums like a forgotten instrument, and every human heart still beats in imperfect rhythm to its hidden song. Perhaps that is what the ancients meant when they said the north wind carries the voices of the gods. Perhaps they did not mean voices at all, but resonance, a call to remember what it feels like to be whole. When we listen to that wind, we are not hearing something outside ourselves, but something returning from within, the memory of a light that never set, a world that never truly vanished. And in that moment of stillness, beneath the whispering sky, one realizes that Hyperborea was never lost. It simply withdrew into silence, waiting for the day we quiet our own noise long enough to hear it again. Like a reflection beneath frozen water, it has always been there, luminous, patient, eternal, reminding us that history is only the shadow of remembrance, and that the true north lies not on any map, but within the echo of our own forgotten light.